What I'd like to talk about today is the manufacturing methodology of zirconia crowns, understanding the difference between milled and waxed and cast. And I want to be very clear about something. The fit and finish of the margins with milled restorations is very good. The problem is the internal, the intaglio, because in the subtractive method of manufacturing, the accuracy is determined by the diameter of the smallest diameter burr utilized to mill. Now they make very small diameter burrs, but the problem is they wear out very quick and need to be replaced. So labs don't want to do that, so they tend to use larger diameter burrs. And the problem is with this, it can result in something that we affectionately refer to as a restoration that fits like socks on a rooster. Now, you may laugh at that narrative, but I want to share with you this restoration. And this restoration came in the hand of a brand new patient who told me this crown came off after 1 year in service. Labs are in business as well. They don't want to remake things. So some labs will ensure fit by even overmilling the internal of a crown. Let's take a look at this crown. It has a good buccal and lingual wall. You can see it has a very big box form, but yet it came off. Look at the thickness of the cement. This is so thick I can measure this with calipers, and cement thickness does matter, as we'll talk about. So just because a crown seats easily doesn't mean it fits well. And CEREC users understand this. They know if they have a proposal where they have a prep with a sharp angle like this, they know their milling burr is only 1 millimeter in diameter, and there's only a couple of options that can happen here. Either it undermills the restoration, which means the restoration won't seat, or it has to overmill, it has to take away more of the material, and then the restoration can seat. Well, this can create problems. I was visiting my lab and he was showing me a proposal on a case, and this is not my case, where he's going to fabricate a 3-unit zirconia FPD, and he was showing me the proposal, and I said, hey, stop for a second. He stopped. I go, what's this? And he goes, what's what? I go, what is this? He goes, oh, well, that's the overmill that's going to occur for the restoration to be fabricated to get past that weird little beak on the occlusal axial line angle. And I said, wait a minute. You're telling me all this material, almost 0.8 of a millimeter, is going to be sacrificed in the overmill? And he goes, yes. I go, doesn't that bother you when this material hangs its hat on the thicker it is, the stronger it is? He got kind of quiet for a couple minutes there. Well, the question really is how did dentistry end up with zirconia? Well, we ended up with it because it was touted as being so much stronger than feldspathic porcelain. It has a flexural strength of 1,000 megapascals versus the flexural strength of feldspathic porcelain at 95 megapascals. How did they get these numbers? First thing they did was a 3-point load test. And what they did is they took a sample of material of a known length and thickness, supported it on 2 ends, and then pushed in the center till it broke. Well, even I can go Hulk on a piece of feldspathic porcelain. Then they developed biaxial loading, where they took a disc of a specific thickness, supported it in 3 points, put a punch in the center, and loaded it till it broke. The problem with biaxial loading is you can change the numbers depending on how you treated the surface. Well, both of these techniques don't seem very clinically applicable to me. How about if we did a test like this? We fabricated the restoration, and then we loaded the restoration occlusally until it broke. And this is what Sun did. Fabricated restorations out of different materials and different thicknesses, bonded them to a PMMA resin tooth, put a 6 millimeter diameter ball bearing on top of it, and loaded it till fracture occurred. I want you to note the strength difference when you lose 0.5 millimeter on zirconia. It drops significantly. Of note, take a look to the far left, the poor metal ceramic restoration, a 1.5 millimeter PFM. If we subtract 0.5 millimeter for metal and opaque, 1 millimeter thick properly supported feldspathic porcelain did almost as well as 1 millimeter thick zirconia in this test. A lot of us like Emax. I love Emax. So you go ahead and you prepare an Emax restoration, you capture an impression, you check the margins, they're beautiful, you're filling out the lab slip or your assistant's filling out the lab slip and you check off, I want an Emax. Well, there are 2 ways to do this. It could be pressed or it can be milled. And I can guarantee you with almost 100% certainty, if your lab offers both, you're going to get a milled restoration because it's faster and cheaper for them to do. Understand, though, that the pressed fits better. Does this mean it's a better restoration? And the answer is yes. Internal adaptation does matter. Biari, in a very interesting study, sent a number of preps out to different labs and asked them to make press restorations as well as CAD restorations. And he measured not only the marginal fit, but the internal fit. He looked at the axial walls and the occlusal surface. And again, the averages are being presented. And as I said earlier, the marginal fit of a CAD restoration is pretty good. In this case, on the lingual, the average was 44 microns. But what about the internal fit? Internal fit, not so good. Significantly greater spacing. Now, I rarely draw lines in the sand, but I'm going to draw one. I'm going to make it 50 microns. And you're saying, well, why 50 microns? I want to quote Mel, and if you read the title, you're going, this is interesting, Lane. The influence of cement film thickness on the retention of implant retained crowns. Well, Mel did something very interesting. He created custom titanium abutments that were the perfect preparation. 6-degree taper, 4.3 millimeters in diameter, and 4 millimeters tall. Then he fabricated restorations with different film thickness spacings, 15, 50, 80, and 110 microns. Cemented the restorations, and then pulled them apart. Now again, this is not a very clinically applicable test, but if you want to know just the sheer strength of cements, this is a good test. And what Mel found is for all the cements, crown retention decreased significantly between a cement film thickness of 15 and 50 microns and fell off the table after 50 microns. Well, this may explain what Johnson found. And Johnson, looking at the retention of metal ceramic crowns, utilizing Rely-X paste-paste hand mix and Rely-X powder liquid hand mix, found that the paste-paste cement exhibited only 1/3 of the casting retention of the powder liquid version. Well, why is that? So we turned to Suleiman, who looked at the physical properties of our resin-modified glass ionomer cements. He looked at film thickness and the bond strength. Suleiman noted something interesting. Just because it's newer, easier, and faster doesn't mean it's necessarily better. Everything we do is involved in interactions. We shouldn't be hanging our hats or making our material selections based on one thing. So when Suleiman looked at bond strength and film thickness, and this is looking at Rely-X, the paste-paste hand mixes on the bottom in orange, it had the best shear bond strength. The hand mix powder liquid wasn't too far behind it. But let's take a look at the film thickness. The paste-paste hand mix had a film thickness almost twice the 50 microns I talked about, while the powder liquid hand mix was well under the 50 microns I talked about. So film thickness of cement matters. We all know in the hierarchy of evidence that RCTs are the highest. The problem with RCTs are they're very expensive to do, and so we don't see a lot of them. So the best we can hang our hats on are systemic reviews. So looking at retention with milled crowns, I found Salyer, which is a systemic review, and he looked at the survival and complication rates. 67 studies met inclusion. These looked at over 4,000 metal ceramic crowns and over 9,000 zirconia crowns. And he looked at an assessment of the 5-year survival rate, which means a lot of the lit did not go out 5 years. So there had to be some extrapolation. And what he found is that zirconia crowns suffered significantly more loss of retention. Now, these are the articles that met inclusion and their numbers. Kind of hard to see, so I'll make it easy. Metal ceramic, less than 1% were lost to retention after 5 years. Zirconia, 4.7%. And you may say that's not a very big difference, but take a look at the standard deviation. 1.7% to 13.1. That's pretty significant. Now, if you're a literature junkie like me, and you like going down rabbit holes, you'll actually pull the articles that met inclusion in the article you're citing. And within Salyer was a gem by Passia. And Passia was a 5-year RCT comparing the success rate of metal ceramic versus zirconia. When it came to retention, He reported a 90.2 estimated survival rate at 5 years for metal ceramic versus a 74.8% survival for zirconia. So subtractive milling does have some problems. Well, you said interactions, Lane. Well, maybe we've just had a lot longer time to work out all the interactions with impression materials, dye stone, wax, investing and burning out and casting. Vajani did a really interesting study. He prepared teeth and fabricated restorations for them using cast and CAD, and he cemented them and measured the cement thickness. So when it came to the CADs, he didn't CAD the crown, he CADed the wax pattern. A much softer material should be more accurate in milling. Then he invested that wax pattern, cemented it, and then measured the cement film thickness, and you can see the results. So on the left is the CAD, and we can see the cement margin, and we can see the cement on the axial wall, versus on the right, the conventional wax and cast, the margin and the axial wall. And visually we can see a difference, and the numbers played out, that the CAD wax patterns had much more internal slop than the conventional wax and cast. The cement layers were much thicker. So I think it's safe to say, while we may not be able to out-mill a pour preparation, we might be able to out-cast it.